Wonderful. So thanks for the people who just are joining in. Sonia was describing her journey from how she found law enforcement. So if you could kind of give us an encapsulated 5-second version, Sonia.
Yeah, the 5-second version is that I decided I was tired of working in an office with no windows.
Okay.
And so I decided to join law enforcement.
Okay, that's awesome. And how was that? I mean, that was 20, you've been on the force for 28 years. You served in a variety of different roles. Were you coming into like almost, well, a male-driven profession, but was it all white? I mean, how was it as a Black woman coming into this? As, how did that go?
Well, it started off great. I was in a class that was probably about 45% Black. So my academy experience was great in terms of diversity. My instructors had a diverse group of those, women, men, Black, white. So from the academy through probably about the first maybe 10 years of my career, it was a great experience. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed what I was doing out on the street. I became a detective about 5 years in. I enjoyed that. Everything was wonderful for a while.
Okay, and then at the point where, so that wasn't a snapshot of the real experience on the force, or how did it change?
Well, I often say that Black officers have a choice point in their careers when they have to decide whether it's more important to be blue or Black. And I had mine about 10 years in.
What can you describe? Was it
It,
a moment?
it was an incident. Actually, it was kind of benign at first. I was supervising a team because my sergeant was not working. And so I backed an officer up on a traffic stop, a white officer. And I had a habit because, I'm a people person. I like to make people laugh. I like to have conversations. And when I would get on the scene of something like a traffic stop, if somebody was in handcuffs, I would be like, okay, so why are you under arrest? Just to make conversation.
Right.
And so when I got there, the officer was searching this man's car. It was a Black male, but the race was not an issue at this point. So I asked the man why he was under arrest. He was standing there in handcuffs, and he says, my driver's license is suspended. I was like, okay. In Maryland, that's an arrestable offense. No problem. When you arrest someone in Maryland, in Montgomery County, you generally search their car. And that's called a search incident to arrest. So the officer searched his car. And then when he was done, he took the handcuffs off and let him drive away. So I was like, yo, you can't do that. First of all, his license is suspended. And if he has like an accident or something, then they're going to question why you allowed him to drive.
Right.
Second of all, you searched a man's car, then you unarrested him when you didn't find anything, and that's against policy.
Okay.
He said to me, are you calling me a racist?
What?
So that's where it all began.
So was the man white or Black? You said the man was Black though, right?
The man was Black.
Okay.
But I had not made like a connection that this was a Black-white issue at all. It was more of a protocol issue.
Right. That's what it sounds like.
I won't go into the whole story because of the time that we have here, but that devolved into me being harassed at work. I was called racist. I was called a rat when I tried to protect myself through the process. It got me nowhere. I had no protections. We had an online message board that was sponsored by the FOP, to which we paid dues. And they maligned my name. They threatened my husband. I mean, it went all the way down the snowball rolling down the hill thing.
Wow. So it if that has happened, then how did the whole captain, I mean, this is you you advance in rank, but while this rancorous situation was going on, how did that happen? And
It took a long time, Maria. 27 years in, uh, it took me that long to make captain. It wasn't because I wasn't qualified.
right.
I didn't have the experience, the skill set, the education. It was none of that. It was because I was outspoken. When I saw something wrong, I would say something. People in policing don't like to talk about race. I'm comfortable talking about it. But when I bring it up and when I see something, I say, hey, you know, racially, that's an issue, then that becomes, I'm a pariah then. And, you know, people want to back off from me. And so that's what took me so long to be promoted.
Wow. Do you think your education and just your experience at Howard has informed your choices and decisions that you would make at work on the
Absolutely.
force?
I like to tell people that Howard creates rebels. Howard creates people who are strong in their principles. Howard creates people who are willing to accept everyone where they are, but are not willing to accept BS. So had I not gone to Howard, I don't know, maybe I would still be the same person, but I'm pretty sure that Howard informed a lot of the decisions that I've made as a police officer.
Wow. Can you give us an example of a triumph and, well, you've described a challenge situation in working for the Montgomery County Police Department, but can you give us an example of a triumphant, um, either a moment, an experience, something that you have worked on? You've been working with young people, you've been working in the community. Um, Describe that work, your community work, and how that's been received.
Okay. So when you're in law enforcement, the running narrative, because of the culture, is that the community does not appreciate us as law enforcers. But I believe that we are the original community police officer. You know, community policing is like a buzz phrase. And if we throw it out there, but it has real meaning, especially to our community. We became police officers. Well, let me back up. You know, policing started with the slave patrols. And moving forward, when we were not allowed to do that anymore, there was a period of time where we were not allowed to police anyone. So now we're in the, let's say, 1700s. We're becoming police officers, but we can't do things like ride in a car with our white counterparts or even have a car to drive. They would drop us off in the black neighborhood and say, police your neighborhood, which is what we did.
Okay.
When I was growing up, we had a sheriff's deputy. He was the only black one in my town. And I didn't know that he was like a rarity, but he was. And I can't imagine what it must have been like for him to become law enforcement in a small southern town in North Carolina.
Right.
So I think fast forwarding that as Black officers, we have held on to this charge that we take care of our communities. So when I go to community events or go and talk to people in underserved communities, they're happy to see us. They don't hate us.
Right.
I don't have that experience. And maybe it's because of who I am, and maybe they can relate to me, but that makes it even better. That makes me valuable, at least to them, and I should be valuable to the police department.
Wow, that's deep. Because you're right. And when you gave the example of how you approach sometimes folks who are handcuffed or apprehended, hey, like, what's up, brother? Well, like, what? Why are you arrested? That just takes the tension. That can save a life. You
Hmm.
know, that kind of interaction can save a life because they know you're human. And that, I think, it's one of the key things that's missing from the policing. And which leads me to my next question. In light of our historical relationship with police, Black folks nationally, currently, historically, in light of Michael Brown,
Mm.
Castillo, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, all killed by police. How do you navigate that context? But then you're this officer, you blue and you black. Um, you're a mother of
And
two
sometimes
teenage
both at the
black
same
boys.
time.
Right. You're a mother of two teenage black boys. How do you do it? What happens? Can you talk about that?
Well, like there's the secret, right? That you can do both at the same time. um, it's other people who don't understand that you can do that.
Okay.
It's not hard for me to navigate.
Okay.
I can arrest somebody today and tomorrow see them and be like, "How you doing?
Okay.
I had to arrest you yesterday. You didn't give me a choice, but I can still care about people." Um, there's a guy named Robert Peel. He's known as the father of modern policing. And he has these 9 Peelian principles. That's what we call them. And they are the principles for ethical policing. All of them lead back to the public being why we exist as law enforcement. And so the public is in charge, guides, tells us what to do. Um, I think in policing, officers like to think we're in charge and people should be doing what we tell them to.
Right.
But that's not why we exist. If you didn't pay your taxes, I wouldn't be getting paid. And when people say to us, I pay your salary, they're kind of right.
So,
So
I mean,
that's how I look at it. I'm in a service industry. I teach a class on organization administration in criminal justice. We're service. That's what we exist for. And if we could remember that, we would probably not have any of these incidents that we have in the country.
yeah. And how many people think like you? How many officers think like you? I mean, certainly not the people who killed Michael Brown and Eric
Mm.
Garner and all of them. Um, how can we? I mean, this is such a big subject, and we can talk all night about it. But hopefully, in my next question, you can kind of go back to how do you influence your fellow officers who may not feel like they're public servants, but they feel like they're dictators and they're to just protect the wealthy and protect
Mhm.
property and bash the head in of a brother, of a teenage black youth. um, how do you influence that? And I guess the larger question is, how did you become involved in the National Black Police Association?
Mm.
Can you weave those two questions in?
Okay. Um, to the first question, which is part of the second question, you have to learn how to be an influencer. Clearly, I have not always influenced my superiors.
Right.
Or maybe I did, which is why I couldn't rise through the ranks as fast as everybody else. And you have to be persistent. And it helps when you have sisters like yourself. I'm gonna give a shout out to LaShawn Montgomery
Mhm.
or LaShawn Hightower for always being in my ear about not giving up. And then the National Black Police Association, I have been a member for 20 years.
Wow.
Much of that time I've spent on the board of directors, learning how the organization works before I stepped up to become the chair. So with the National Black Police Association, you have a group of police officers from across the country, Canada, the UK, and the Caribbean, who are all like-minded, who have the same types of experiences in their police departments, who understand the value of standing for our communities, because in doing so, we're standing for ourselves. So that's how I navigate, by just staying like grounded. But you also need someone to stand with you. I mean, there were many times when I felt very alone in the police department, but I had friends on the outside to bolster me and to support me and to motivate me. And every day you just put one foot in front of the other. There were days when I would go home and cry and then go back to work the next day and stand strong. I mean, there's really no choice. That's the kind of people I come from too. That's part of my DNA. And then there's Howard, didn't have a choice.
Yeah, they give you life and energy. Yeah.
But it's hard. So you do need a mentor, somebody to help you. You can't do it by yourself.
So what does the National Black Police Association do? Why do you need that organization? Why do we need them?
We fill in where there are holes in police departments for Black officers. And we fill in where there are holes in the fabric of relationships between the police and the community. Our mission states that we stand for the African American community, but we're really standing for everyone.
Right on. Wow. Can you give me an example of how you guys have stood for everyone, like the ordinary man?
Yeah. So what I'll start with is why we were founded in the first place. So in 1972, a group of officers from police departments from 15 cities across the country came together with the same issues: not being able to be promoted, not even being able to be hired. Some people, the NBPA helped them with that later. But these officers were trying to reach back into their communities so that we could have proper representation of our communities in the police departments. So then there was the promotion piece. There's being discriminated against in terms of discipline, things like that. So what they did was form the NBPA, and then when someone had an issue in their city, they would get together and they would travel to that city. If a lawsuit needed to be filed, if they needed to have a press conference, those are the kinds of things they did. Then there was our community. We did not want other officers to abuse the people in our communities. So our job was to stand in the breach. If we had to tell on somebody, if we had to testify, if we had to call them out, that's what we would do. And we may still do that right now, which is why we still exist. It's almost 50 years later, and we're still doing the same work. Same issues for Black officers, same issues for the community. Nothing has really changed much. It just looks a little bit different.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm going to get ready to open up the floor, Sonia, but weren't you telling me about a Colin Kaepernick? Didn't you mention how Colin Kaepernick, can you tell us about your involvement or the NBPA's involvement with Kaepernick? And then we're going to open up the floor because I know other people have questions.
Sure. So during the time when Colin Kaepernick was being ignored by the NFL because he, did the Black Power thing. There was a police organization called NAPO. That stands for National Association of Police Organizations. It's an umbrella organization. And they put out this scathing letter about Kaepernick kneeling and, just not respecting the flag and all these things that they made up. And we, in turn, as the NBPA, issued our own letter refuting what they said and talking about how Colin Kaepernick has the right to use his First Amendment privileges to protest if he wants to. And anybody who says anything else might have some racial tendencies. Well, that blew up because for a lot of people, they had never heard police officers take that stance.
Right.
And so then they became curious about who we were as a result.
That's awesome. That is great. And I think that we need to bring these kinds of things to the forefront so that the community will learn how you all stand as Black people. You're
Yes.
Black first, and then you're officer. So that's very important, and we need to.
And they're not mutually exclusive. We can do both at the same time.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think, even myself. I mean, you grow up with a negative perspective on police because I was kind of a Black Panther baby, so it wasn't a cool, police, yay, no. So
listen, Maria, my mother, when she was pregnant with me, she got hosed down by the police on the steps of town hall. I always figured that kind of set my path.
Yeah. She was pregnant with you?
Yes.
That's great. That's great. That's great. That's awesome. Well, thank God for you and your role. And we certainly need, hopefully you can travel around and become a consultant to police forces throughout the country. I'm serious, because this can save lives, this kind of work that you're doing. We're going to open up the floor for questions. I don't want to hog the scene. If there are any questions, please raise your hand.
Yes, Maria, this is Claudette. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good evening, Sonia. Thank you very much for the work that you've done for the community and representing the Bison Village out there in the world. And definitely Howard does teach us a few things about what's acceptable and what's not appropriate. So I completely appreciate your position on that. One of the concerns I have in terms of law enforcement at this time is the assault that's happening on some of our elected officials, especially the district attorneys and the attorney generals, the Black women in particular who've stepped into very activism roles trying to correct some of the wrongs that's out there. And it seems that they're standing alone. Nobody's coming to support them. The young woman in Chicago, the young woman in even here in Maryland, on Prince George's County, Brave Boys also under assault. So how is your association and your union helping to stand and create fraternity with these other entities?
I'm trying to remember the young lady's name in Chicago. It's Kim.
Hill. I think the last name is Hill.
When she came under attack by the police chiefs, well, they were the white police chiefs in Chicago, in the Chicago area. They had a press conference and they came for her. I actually traveled to Chicago to help defend her in the media. It didn't get national attention, but I was there. I spoke at the Rainbow Coalition, Jesse Jackson, Santita Jackson, our alum mate. And then I wrote some letters. We did a press release, and we still support them on social media. Last year, I attended a function where many of the states and district attorneys who are under attack were honored and acknowledged by an organization that I'm a member of. So we're not leaving them out there by themselves. But you know, the media kind of picks and chooses what they really want to highlight. They know that they can contact us anytime, and we're willing to support them. But we believe in what they're doing. Listen, they're trying to minimize our incarceration. Marijuana is a big issue for our community for some reason. I feel like it's that that one charge that some officers feel like we can levy against Black people, because I think they really believe that we smoke the most marijuana. But that's not the case. So I understand what these attorneys are trying to do. So yeah, we support them as an organization, but we may be one of the only organizations that are in support of them as far as law enforcement is concerned.
Alphonse, let me just correct. The young lady's name is Fox, Kim Fox. Sorry about that.
Kim Fox, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yes, this is Seth.
Seth, yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask
Hi,
Sonia, how are you today?
Okay.
Good. I wanted to ask, how connected is your organization with Black media? Because you mentioned that you went to Chicago, and so, you know, what of the media sources within our community were aware of that? Or, you know, is there a constant cycle of communication that you all have with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have a relationship with Black media.
Okay.
There's a brother who works for Chicago Sun-Times who's, you know, I'm having a problem remembering names tonight. We have a relationship with him. But even if he posts something in the Sun-Times, it doesn't mean it's going to get national attention.
Right.
Some of that is on us.
Okay.
And building relationships. We also have a relationship with it's the National African American Newspaper. I don't know the exact name. So we do have some contacts.
Yes.
But again, you know how the news cycle is. Sometimes it's hit or miss.
Right.
I would like for us to have a better face. And that's something that we probably need to really work on. And if you're trying to help us, okay.
Well, you know, I would love to talk with you offline about that.
Okay.
I've got a question, but I'm going to comment on if I can piggyback. This is Alphonse. Hey, Sonia, how you doing, sis?
Okay. Hey.
Hey. It always seems to me that, and this kind of ties into what Seth was saying, that no matter what work African American police officers are doing in the community, they catch it from all sides. You know, you catch it from the community that doesn't trust you, you know, unless you are directly from and living in that community. And then you not only catch it from politicians and, you know, whoever is the body who's running for office at the time, but then you also catch it from your white counterparts, your coworkers. It sounds like a really very fine line to walk. How do you navigate that? Because you gave us instances that you faced yourself. How, it doesn't sound to me like the police, that the police teach you how. It sounds to me like you had to go and form your own organization to do so. Does that come in conflict with what they teach you and what they ask of you on the police force?
Wow, that's a great question. And it can come into conflict. We have some officers in the country who may be members of our organization, but still may not feel free to speak on issues. We want to normalize that. Just because I don't agree with another officer doesn't make me any less law enforcement. I'm valid. I've done my job. I've done a great job. And even if I don't agree with that person, that doesn't make them any less of a law enforcer. We can both exist in the same space. We just don't agree. The problem is that when you stand for issues of equity, diversity, social justice to other officers who may not believe in those same things, is seen as racism. We're called racist. I've been called racist. I'm like, how am I racist? We know what racism really looks like and what racism means, what the word means. So again, you have to be very strong in your principles. You have to do what's right at all times. And the great thing about policing is we have policy. So even when you want to get caught up in emotion, you just go to the policy. And the policy guides you to do the right thing, whether people actually do the right thing or not. That's why it's really important that the top tiers of policing are filled with people who look like their communities, because that's where policy is made. Important decisions are made. That's the value of that. And so, yes, it is very hard to navigate and walk that line, but it's not impossible. If I need support, someone from somewhere else will come in and support me. It doesn't have to be someone from my police department, and vice versa.
The only other thing I would say, and then I'm going to cede the floor to everybody else, the thing that Seth asked, I think, is really important as far as you having connections and a relationship with the media, especially in this day and age of social media. And I would hope, especially, you know, there are young people joining the force all the time, and they're more adept at social media than some of us old fogies are. But I would strongly suggest getting them involved, because they're able to collect, present, and disseminate a message or information across these various platforms quicker than even your local news or even newspapers. I mean, who reads newspapers? You know what I mean? It seems to me that you guys, along with having the organization, you need a media mechanism that allows you to connect with your community, push a message or an agenda, counteract things that are being said. And I think, you know, as a father, you know, I worry about my kids all the time, just being young and Black, being out in the world. It would be wonderful to know that they know that every cop that they see, especially cops of color, are not the enemy and are not someone or something for them to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
So
I totally agree, Alphonse. We need to,
thank you.
Yeah, promote this work that you all are doing. Any other questions? I think another marching band alum, Cynthia Sexton, one of your flashy flag. I think she just joined.
Okay.
So
Hi, Cynthia.
we're giving folks the opportunity to talk to Captain Pruitt, to ask questions of her work with the National Black Police Association.
Can I fill in right here? Just want to let everybody know that we're having a social justice summit in Cleveland this summer. That's July 16th, 17th, and 18th. The reason we're going to Cleveland is because they were one of our founding chapters back in 1972. And as you know, Cleveland has had a lot of issues with the police community relationship. Tamir Rice stands out as one of the biggest ones. And so we felt like we needed to go somewhere where we could really engage the community and show them how much we appreciate them and that we're there for them. So go to our website, www.blackpolice.org. Information.
Sonia, I have a question. I know I've got a long-time childhood friend who was a policeman, then went into FBI, did a career with them, and then into corporate security. What's the difference between Noble and your organization, as well as other Black law enforcement organizations? Because when you first came on, I said, oh, is she is this a part of Noble? Is she the chair of Noble? What's the difference between the two organizations?
So Noble is our sister organization in that we were founded in 1972, and then in 1976, members left the NBPA to form Noble. NOBLE stands for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. So that meant anyone lieutenant and above could become a member of NOBLE. Okay. They felt a need to have a separate group. Fast forward, you can now become a member of NOBLE from a lower rank. But for me, and I'm a member of NOBLE because I'm a captain, I think the focus is probably still more on the executive membership, training, and that sort of thing. NBPA is grassroots. When you ask us a question, we're probably going to answer it real straight and head on, and you might even hear a curse word every once in a while. NOBLE is a little more polished. And I could probably go on and on, but that's the basics of the difference between the two of us. We run in some of the same circles, but we approach situations differently.
And are there other similar types of organizations like NOBLE, your organization, that are led by Black folk?
Yes.
People? There's some others?
Yes, there are. There's an association called the National Association of Black Law Enforcement. I'm sorry, NABLEO, Black Law Enforcement Officers. National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Then there's another one called Black Law Enforcement of America. That's from my friend Damon Jones. And so moving forward, we have this. But let me mention one more organization. It's called the Ethical Society of Police. The president's name is Heather Taylor. You should Google her. Powerful woman. She's a sergeant in St. Louis PD. We have been considering forming another group that does not involve a board of directors, not a 501c3, but just so that we can have a voice to really attack head on the issues that we're having in the country. For instance, Attorney General Barr recently had a conversation with police officers where he told them if the community does not respect you, they could find themselves without any police protection.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're looking at forming something a little more concentrated to address those issues head on.
Yeah.
We'll let you know how that progresses.
So are you saying you don't, through your organization and others, you don't have that could address Mr. Barr?
We do. And as a matter of fact, I released a press release. I wrote a letter all about that. But my span of influence is greater if we have the strength of the strongest organizations together. My organization is only one, but if we pulled in BLEA, or we pulled in another, or the Ethical Society of Police, and then we present ourselves in the united front, that protects our membership. And all they're gonna see is, wow, who is that? These powerful people, where did they come from? That's our goal.
Yeah. Coalition
not
building.
just to be one organization, but to be a whole conglomeration of very strong organizations.
Got it.
That's a very important strategic method. You need that, especially when addressing issues like that. And we appreciate it because that's, the statement that he made put us under attack. I mean, we've always been under attack, but certainly that he just spoke it. And so,
because you know what community he's speaking about.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Definitely. Okay.
Maria,
Yes. Hello.
Great. Hello. Hey, Sonia.
Hi, Guy.
Hey. Question. When you end your career, what type of indelible mark you want to leave with law enforcement? So that, is it that you want to leave some mark, as far as a legacy that people could say, well, hey, you know, Sonia, she left this so that it could influence in all people that you come in contact with within your work, friends, family, etc. What type of indelible mark you want to leave? Your legacy.
I think that my legacy would be that I understand the purpose. I understand my purpose. That everyone that I advocate for everyone to be treated fairly and justly.
Mm-hmm.
That people understand that me and anybody that I lead also understand that our community is not the enemy. We're not thugs. We're not criminals. We come from a wonderful people. We come from kings and queens, that our lives are valuable. I want people to understand that that's the message that I push forward as my own personal legacy.
Very nice, very nice. Because I know that that speaks to whatever adversities that you've been through, like whatever you've encountered, like your earlier story about that stop, and you know, you were then trying to make a mark. You know, you were then trying to do that, but unfortunately it was stopped. But from that point, I guess you saw with yourself that, you know what, I got some work to do. And when I leave, hopefully everybody.
No, actually, I wasn't thinking that. I was actually kind of scared. But
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
God or the universe, you know,
Okay,
my
well-
ancestors, they all had me, right?
Well, you were kind of scared, but at the same time, you know, I'm sure that was more or less of an idea that popped in your mind that, you know, later on, after the passions cooled and all that stuff, you know, you were like, well, man, I gotta do something about this, you know,
And I got to do it right. I got to be right at all times because I want to get my rewards and my blessings.
Oh, well, you're well on your way, so it seems, you know. So that's all. I didn't want to make a long story long, but thanks.
Thank you, Guy, for that question. We appreciate that.
No problem.
Any others from the floor before we circle back around to Claudette's question? Okay, Claudette, are you there?
Sure. This is a little on the spectrum out here, but looking on a couple things that are happening globally and locally at the same time. How does your organization weigh in on events such as the pandemic that is actually occurring in our communities? Because we're starting to see a lot of countries closing their borders and shutting down community access to certain services. Although it's not being reported, in my opinion, properly in terms of how this virus, in my mind, germ warfare is being affected. What kind of position is your organization going to take when you're going to be told to hold people in place in the communities? Because the Chinese folks are now feeling what it's like walking around while black.
Yeah.
So every little group, ethnic group, is starting to have a taste of what we've been experiencing. But I'm just curious because the World Health Organization finally did come out and say this is a pandemic. And South Korea is blowing up over there. Italy is blowing up over there. And bit by bit, different airlines are stopping travel. So how are we going to manage that in our communities here?
You know, I love your question because it's not just the pandemic. You know, I often think, what are we going to do if at any time we're asked to do something that's going to have a negative effect on any one group of people? I kind of almost feel like we're headed in that direction with the administration we have right now in the White House. And I don't have an answer for that. My organization has not addressed anything similar to that on such a huge level. And I think it's a conversation we probably need to have as a board and an organization, because that is becoming more real every day. We've been comfortable. We haven't had to deal with anything like that. But now it's kind of hitting us in the face. So I don't have an answer for you except to say that I get it. And I don't think it's something that we should ignore.
That's why I brought it up, because I do strategic planning. And that's one of the things I'm noticing is that it's a fly by the seat of your pants. I worked for Homeland Security in the past. And I don't think a lot of citizens recognize that when we get into these DEFCON 1, 2, and 3 situations, you as a citizen is being responsible for your livelihood and your welfare and your well-being.
Yes.
And then the law enforcement piece of it will have to step in because you're going to have to contain people in different areas. So you need to have some strategy in place on how to deal with it.
Remember what happened in New Orleans during the hurricane?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That was a hot mess with the police, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And and so I'm not taking your question lightly at all. I get it.
And then the last question I had, which you kind of alluded to, is your organization looking at the current candidates that are opposing Trump? Is there anybody that you all see that's in alignment with your mission and agenda or your vision for what America should look like in the next go-round?
I have two answers to that. The first one is we're a 501c3, so we don't generally support any particular candidate. And then my second answer to that is Kamala Harris, but she's not, but she's not the candidate anymore.
Understood.
So on a personal note, talking to my peers across the country, we're probably all in agreement that we're headed backwards right now. And so whatever we got to do to change the way things look right now in the administration, that's what we're really ready to do. However that looks.
Okay. So then you all are ready for the morning after too, right?
Oh, I don't know if anybody can ever get ready for that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, this has been a great conversation, Sonia. We thank you so much, and
Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. Just, illuminating the work that you're doing, the very important work that you're doing. I was having, right before this conversation, I was talking with a Howard alum, and they were just arguing about why policing is not, that you're not revolutionary. And I said, that Black police officers can't be revolutionary. I said, no, the work that Sonia is doing, particularly with this organization, is revolutionary, because anytime y'all are saving lives and changing thought patterns from negative to positive, that is revolutionary work. So I wish that person had joined the call, but that's his loss.
Listen, to me, revolutionary looks like continuing to press forward until it becomes the norm.
Right. Right.
And then is it revolutionary then, or is it just normal? These conversations, standing for what's right inside our police departments, it should be the norm.
Right. So thank God for you all, and thank God for the work that you're doing. We really appreciate it. Yes. There was one. Okay, can we take one more call? One more question? Yes, Raina.
Yes, hello, Sonia. Thank you for the work that you do. I had a question. So I work in higher education. I spent the last few years talking to students about career pathways. And you mentioned earlier that you teach a class. And I think if I were a student and I was taught by a police officer, that in itself would change my perception. So my question is, how are, not only you personally, but also the National Black Police Association, how are you recruiting or trying to recruit or to increase the number of Black police officers, just in general?
Raina, I'm going to say to you, I need you to ask me that question again about 3 weeks, because I'm going to have an extended answer. I can't tell you why, but right now I'm going to say this to you. Many of the Black officers I know are out there reaching out to our young people, coaxing them, I like your last name, to become the police. We cannot change this environment in law enforcement because it's a culture. It is well entrenched. The claws are dug in. We cannot change that without having people who look like us being the face of law enforcement, right? Yeah. At Montgomery College, where I work, they welcome the fact that I'm the police. They understand that there are students in my class most of which are like, it's like my classes are 95% of color. They understand that I am sharing with them these same things and asking them, hey, could you consider a career in law enforcement? Because we really need you. I'm proud to say that a lot of my students have become officers, interns, cadets, police explorers. I'm glad that I have that effect, but we need to multiply that, because we're getting smaller. Our numbers are getting smaller in police departments. We really need young people to join the force and be willing to, just take it on. It's easier in numbers, right? So the more we have, the better the situation is on the inside. And thus we can make change on the outside.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Raina. Great question. Our last question will come from Shawande T'Challa.
Hey.
Hey, Sonia. Is there any data to support that departments that are run by people of color have fewer incidents of police brutality in Black communities? And if so, can that be a rallying point for these other Black law enforcement organizations to get more diverse representation?
That's a
like
loaded
at the higher
question.
level.
So there are some studies. Studies give mixed results. There's some that say yes, there's some that say no, because as we could probably guess, not every Black officer is going to represent the best interest of a Black community. Anecdotally, I would say yes. I would say that we tend to look at people who are like us, not as criminals as much. We're not fearful of our own people. When people are different from us, we're not fearful of them either. We're just like, well, they're just different from us. We don't have to be afraid or even pretend like we're afraid or, So I would say, again, anecdotally, that we're kind of made for this law enforcement thing. Like I said earlier on, we're like the first community police officers. I manage the school resource officers in the police department in Montgomery County. All of the school resource officers do a really good job. But I have a lot of Black officers who are school resource officers, and they're drawn to that because they're drawn to community and helping people and helping kids. Not to say the white officers are not drawn to that, but I'm just noticing that a lot of Black officers are drawn to that kind of position in policing. And I think that that's why, because this is what we're just comfortable with, community.
Awesome. That's great. Wow. Well, let's put our hands together for Captain Chair Sonia Pruitt. Put your hands together. Thank you, Sonia.
Yay. Thank you.
Excellent. And
thanks for having me.
You definitely have to come back and give us an update. We do 6 Zoom calls a year, 5 or 6 Zoom calls a year, and we're booked for the rest of the year. But next year, you got to come back and give us those updates, please.
Or she can come back at the end of one of those interviews and tell us what the update is.
Yeah. Good.
I'm fond of playing for keeps. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Media professional. That's what we do.
Yes.